Camilla didn't just inherit a name from Alice Keppel. She inherited the exact position Queen Alexandra crushed once already in the same palace over a century ago. And one of the tools Alexandra used to end her? The wronged side's heir holds it now, carried today by Catherine, Alice Keppel, Mistress to Edward VII, from 1898 to his death in 1910. Openly, publicly, in the same royal circles Alexandra had to walk 12 years. Then the king died, and the door closed on Alice inside a week. Camilla cannot outrun her own family tree. Alice Keppel was her great-grandmother. The pattern repeats. Mistress to a Prince of Wales, mistress to a king, tolerated while the king lived, erased the day he died. Alexandra wrote the playbook. History does not predict Camilla's future. It simply lays the record beside the bloodline and lets you look. By the end of this video, you'll hear how Alexandra ended Alice in 14 steps, ranked from social erasure to historical footnote. Stay for step 12, the family tree that turns a history lesson into a warning. And near the end, step 14, the one Camilla should already be afraid of, a great-grandmother, a queen, a door that has closed on this family once. Let's walk through it. Number 1. The king dies, and the only thing protecting Alice dies with him. Edward VII died at Buckingham Palace on the 6th of May, 1910, just after 11:30 at night. For 12 years, Alice Keppel's entire standing in the world had rested on one single thing: the king's favor. Not a title, not a right, not a drop of royal blood, just the king's affection and the access it bought her. The night that affection ended, everything built on it began to fall. This is the first rule of the Mistress, and it has never changed. She holds her place through the man who wears the crown. When he goes, the place goes with him. There is no document to fall back on, no lease, no line of succession. There is only the man. And men die. The wife knew it, and the wife did not wait for the funeral to act. She reclaimed her husband while he was still breathing, and that is the shape of this entire story. A woman at the very top of London society, feared and courted for 12 years, held it all on a foundation of one man's affection, and the instant that man's heart stopped, the foundation was gone. There was nothing underneath it. There never had been. Number 2. The deathbed. Get that woman away. Years earlier, Edward had written Alice a letter. If he were ever dying, those around him should let her come to him. When the king was known to be dying, Alice sent that letter to Queen Alexandra, and Alexandra, the wife he had humiliated for a dozen years, did something extraordinary. She allowed her in. She honored the letter. Alice came to the bedside and she broke down. Then, as the king slipped out of consciousness for the last time, Alexandra turned to the doctor and said 4 words that are still in the record today. Get that woman away. One moment of grace from the wronged wife, and then the reclaiming. In her husband's last conscious minute, the wife took him back, and the mistress was removed from the room. Alexandra decided who was there at the end, and it would not be Alice. For 12 years, Edward had chosen Alice over the wife he'd humiliated. In his final minute, the choice was taken out of his hands, and the wife made it instead. That is the moment the power changed hands. Not at the funeral, not in the will, at the bedside, in 4 words. Number 3, dragged out hysterical in front of the whole palace. Alice, distraught, was escorted out of the room by members of the royal household, a scene witnessed by staff and remembered in every account written since. The composed society hostess, the most powerful woman in London, for a decade broke down completely, publicly inside the palace. The mistress's dignity is always the first thing to go, and it goes in front of the very court that had spent 12 years tolerating her. Everyone who had smiled at Alice, invited her, deferred to her, now watched her carried out weeping. The king wasn't even cold. Already the room had rearranged itself around the widow. That is how fast it turns. One night, one death, and a woman who had been at the center of everything was suddenly a problem to be removed. Read that against everything the mistress had been the day before. The woman whose invitations mattered, whose favor opened doors, whose word carried a king's ear. all of it, revoked in a single night by a single death. That is how thin the mistress's power always was. Number 4, the side door, at the funeral. 14 days later, at Edward VII's funeral, on the 20th of May, the royal family had Alice Keppel enter and leave through a side door. A cold, documented demotion staged in front of the entire establishment. It was the ceremonial version of the deathbed, the palace saying, in architecture, what Alexandra had said in words. The mistress does not walk the main aisle. Where you enter tells everyone what you are. For 12 years, Alice had walked through the front. Now, at the very moment the whole world was watching the monarchy grieve, she was sent around the side, out of sight, out of the picture. Think about how cold that is. In the middle of a state funeral, someone made a decision about which door Alice Keppel would use. That is how completely the wife had reclaimed the story. The king's mistress sent around the side of his own funeral, while the wife walked at the front, wrapped in a nation's grief. 12 years of proximity to the crown, and Alice couldn't even use the main door to mourn the man she'd shared it with. Number 5, no place in the nation's grief. The country mourned with Alexandra, the devoted widow, the picture of dignity, the wife who had endured. Alice had no role in the grief, no acknowledgement, no line in the official story of the king's death. When the king dies, the wife becomes the nation's mourner, and the mistress becomes an embarrassment to be managed out of the frame. Alexandra didn't have to fight for that. It was simply the shape of the thing. The wife grieves in public, wrapped in the nation's sympathy. The mistress grieves alone, if she grieves at all, with no one to tell and nowhere to stand. 12 years at the king's side, and when he died, Alice wasn't even a footnote in the mourning. She was a name to be kept out of it. Diana would understand that shape better than anyone. The wronged wife gets the sympathy. The woman who caused the wound gets quietly managed aside. In 1910, the whole nation's sympathy belonged to Alexandra. And the modern version of that sympathy, the love a country keeps for the wife who was wronged, belongs to Diana. Number 6. The new court shuts its doors. Edward's son became King George V, and he and Queen Mary brought a far more austere, moralistic court. The old king's mistress had no entree to the new reign, none. The reign that followed simply did not want her. A new reign resets the room, and whoever belonged to the last king's world does not automatically belong to the next one. This is the part that should echo. A change of monarch is a change of who counts. The people the old king protected, the new king owes nothing. Alice had been safe under Edward because Edward chose to keep her close. Under his son, that choice no longer existed. The protection didn't just end. It was replaced by a court that found her presence a stain to be scrubbed. Number 7. Society reads the room and follows the queen. Alexandra never had to campaign. Once the court cooled, society cooled with it. The invitations, the entree, the standing, all quietly withdrawn. The hostess who had entertained everyone found the doors closing one by one. Social power is borrowed from the crown, and when the crown withdraws it, the crowd follows within a season. Nobody announced Alice's fall. There was no statement, no scandal, no scene. There didn't need to be. The room simply read where the wife stood and rearranged itself accordingly. The same people who had courted Alice for 12 years now found reasons not to. That is the quiet machinery of erasure. Not a blow, but a temperature drop felt everywhere at once. By the time Alice understood what was happening, it had already happened. The room had moved on. Number 8. The exile. The Keppels leave England. The Keppels left the country. They traveled the Far East for around 2 years and eventually settled abroad. Later at a villa in Florence. Out of London, out of sight, out of the story. When the room closes, the mistress leaves. To a comfortable exile, yes, but an exile all the same. Alice had money, a husband, a life. What she no longer had was a place in the world she had ruled. This is where the mistress goes, not to prison, not to poverty, but to a beautiful nowhere, far from the only stage that ever mattered to her. She spent her last decades looking at Italian hills instead of London society, comfortable, erased. The villa in Florence was beautiful, and it was the end of her. A mistress doesn't get thrown in a cell. She gets a lovely view and a closed door, and she spends the rest of her years looking at hills, remembering a palace that no longer remembers her. Stay with me, because step 12 is the one that changes everything. The family tree that turns Alice Keppel from a history lesson into Camilla's own inheritance. But first, 9, 10, and 11, because those are the steps that show what erased actually means. Not just out of the room, but out of the record, out of the title, out of history itself. Number 9. Written out of the King's Year's story. Edward VII's official memory was curated around Alexandra, the devoted wife. Alice, central to 12 years of his life, was quietly edited out of the sanctioned story. History is written by the survivors, and the wife survived. The wife writes the king's memory. The mistress is left out of it. Everything Alice had been to Edward, the confidant, the companion, the woman he wrote a letter for so she could see him die, was smoothed over, tidied away, kept out of the portrait the palace wanted the country to keep. She didn't just lose her place at court, she lost her place in the truth. And a woman who is erased from the record can be denied she ever mattered at all. The wife decides how the king is remembered, and Alexandra remembered him without the mistress anywhere in the picture. That is a power no title can match, the power to write someone out of a life they spent 12 years inside. Number 10. No claim on anything of the crown. Whatever the king had given Alice was private. She had no royal title, no royal property, no claim on the crown's estate or its jewels. Nothing of the institution survived his death. A mistress accumulates favor, not entitlement. When the favor ends, there is nothing of the crown to keep. This is the same wall every woman in this position hits. The gifts are personal, the access is temporary, and the moment the king is gone, none of it is hers to hold. Alice walked away with what Edward had bought her as a man, and nothing of what he commanded as a king. The crown gives the mistress everything and owes her nothing, and when the bill comes due, she finds her hands are empty. Number 11, just Mrs. Keppel. Never a rank, never a title. For all her influence, Alice was only ever Mrs. George Keppel. No peerage, no honor, no royal style, ever. The mistress got proximity and none of the standing. Influence without rank evaporates the moment the man who granted it is gone. A borrowed seat at the top of the world is still a borrowed seat, and it is emptied the instant the loan is called. Alice had shaped a king's opinions, hosted his circle, walked his corridors, and she carried to the end of her life the plainest name in the room, because a mistress is never made permanent. She's never written into the institution. She's only ever allowed near it on sufferance for as long as one man chooses. Then she is Mrs. Keppel again. Number 12. The bloodline carries the brand, straight down to Camilla. Here is the step no other channel can match, because it isn't a comparison. It's a birth certificate. Alice's line continued. Alice Keppel, to her daughter Sonia, to her daughter Rosalind Cubit, to her daughter Camilla. 4 generations. And the great-granddaughter took the same road, mistress to a Prince of Wales, then mistress to a king. The pattern didn't rhyme. It descended. This is a family tree, not a parallel. The same position, in the same palace, in the same blood. Everyone else who tells this story draws a lazy line between Camilla and a royal mistress. This one shows you the birth certificates. Camilla is Alice Keppel's great-granddaughter, a fact she has acknowledged herself. The last woman in her family to sleep with a king left through a side door and died in exile. And that woman's blood runs directly to the queen. Let that settle for a second. This is a documented line of descent, 4 generations deep, from the woman who left by the side door to the woman who wears the crown. The role repeated, the blood carried it. Everything that happened to Alice in 1910 is written into the family tree of the woman it could happen to next. Number 13, the historical footnote. Remembered only as the mistress. Alice Keppel died in 1947, and history remembers her as one thing, and one thing only: Edward VII's mistress. Not the wit, not the hostess, not the woman. The affair became her whole legacy, erased as a person, preserved as a cautionary tale. This is the final erasure, and it is the cruelest one. Not exile, but the epitaph. To be remembered forever as the other woman, and nothing else. Everything Alice was, everything she built, everything she might have wanted to be known for, was collapsed into a single line in a single chapter of somebody else's story. That is what ended finally means. Removed first from the room, then from the record, then from the reign, and fixed permanently as the mistress. The role swallowed the woman, and history filed her under it. Everything she was, gone. One word left standing over her grave: mistress. The same word waits, patient, over the great-granddaughter who took the very same road 4 generations later. Number 14, the pattern. Tolerated while the king lives, erased when he dies. This is where it all converges, and this is the step Camilla should already be afraid of. Every step you've heard is one rule, executed once. A mistress is tolerated while the king lives and erased the moment he dies. And the wronged wife and the reign that follows her decide how completely. Alexandra held that pen in 1910. Now look at the mirror and let it speak for itself. The position Alice held, Camilla holds, and the position Alexandra held, the wronged sides, belongs now to Diana's line, carried by Catherine. This video does not tell you what happens next. It cannot. What it can do is lay the 1910 playbook beside a living family tree and let you see the resemblance. History doesn't repeat, but in this one family it has an uncomfortable habit of descending. The last time this door closed, the mistress left by the side entrance, and her name was Keppel. Those were the 14 steps. From the night a king died and the wife took him back, to the historical footnote Alice Keppel became. A mistress, a wife, a door that has closed on this exact family once, in this exact palace. Alexandra wrote it down with her conduct in 1910, and history kept the record. Whether it's ever read again is not for us to say. Only that the last time it was opened, the mistress left through a side door. Where Alexandra acted with her own hand, the modern wronged wife left hers to her son. Diana didn't live to close the door herself, so she did the next best thing. She left William 20 warnings about the very woman Charles crowned, and he's acting on everyone. If you want to see the list Diana left her son, that video is right here.